OpenAI just raised $6.6 billion and the largest VC fundraise to date. But there's something more important than even the money. And what is that, Sasha?
It's actually what Sam Altman spoke about at the DevDay and how probably they see themselves deploying that capital.
All right, how are you going to spend it? Let's dive in. So Sam Altman just raised $6.6 billion, but just before he announced it, they have this intimate setting. It's their OpenAI DevDay, where he speaks to the developers. And in this fireside chat, he shares these nuggets, as you say, Sasha, kind of the gems that's going to kind of lay out what the next several years will be like.
In these first 20 minutes or so, he actually lays out a lot of really interesting information that gives you a sense of like how the ecosystem is unfolding and the runway they see in the existing models and the architecture that they're exploring. A lot of this, again, is informed and based on the research pathways. And he comes out a couple of times actually and says research is still one of the highest priorities at OpenAI. And that's actually for the research community, that's massive. But what really I take away from it, like I said, is that Sam basically says they see a huge amount of runway over the next 2 years in their current models, architecture, and research. And that, in my mind, says that they've actually got a lot of really promising leads when it comes to each one of those threads. The rate of innovation that we've seen over the last 18 months or so, we can expect to see that for the next 2 years. And we'll put up a slide here for the AGI definitions. He actually spent some time going through all of these and he said, you know what, I think we're on track to unlock the next 1 or 2 layers here and that we're currently at level 2, but he wouldn't be surprised if we reach level 3 or potentially even level 4 in the next couple of years. These are massive, massive milestones. And anyone in the research community would agree that yes, if we did unlock these, society would actually look quite different than what it does today.
That's really interesting because, what I've heard, obviously I saw the headlines and people are like, wow, all this money. It just seems like they're just after more product and release stuff that's before it's ready. And they're kind of like throwing away the research, just making money and making stuff. But you're saying, no. If you go back, just rewind the tape a little bit before the headlines hit. Actually, what he was saying is that, no, actually what's driving all of this is the R&D, is the deep science behind it that will drive the products and obviously the profit that they're looking for. So it's a very different message than kind of what the big headlines that came out early this morning.
Totally agree. And if you look at actually that they're not actually in the same race. When you look at the benchmarks, the capabilities, they're doing these paradigm leaps by basically looking at what is the rate limiting step, which is something that we've spoken about, and then actually going off and doing the research. And the most recent unlock with O1 was reasoning. We've spoken about that whole bunch on this series. But really, like what he's basically saying is like with the current architecture and the research pathways, they can see that expanding and the capabilities going into that AGI framework, they can see them making a decent level of progress towards levels 3 and 4 with the existing tools that they've got, which is very, very interesting. And that's a very subtle but important signal that he's sending to the developers in the room here. That is the audience that he wants to basically to say, like, hey, you can trust that you can lean on the generalist models and the capabilities that we'll be providing you rather than necessarily going off and fine tuning and trying to build your own models. So I take that as a pretty strong signal on that vein as well.
That is interesting. Okay, what else did he say?
He's made a comment about systems that are capable of managing computers being fairly close on the capability side. And that the main concern actually around that is around safety and alignment. People have spoken about safety and alignment for a long time, but letting these systems go off and work autonomously, being close to the horizon, that is actually a way bigger deal than most people actually understand. Again, we've spoken on this series before around if you have a vision model that can see your screen and it can interact with your mouse and keyboard, providing the inputs and outputs, that starts to look like a universal API. You don't necessarily have to go off and build an API into that software, to basically build a connection between two things. You could just let your computer go off and have a ghost system, running a virtual machine and doing all this work for you on the side.
So this is not just like ordering pizza for me online, get my Grubhub, I order my Pizza Hut. You're saying like at minimal.
Yeah, at minimum. Like they're basically saying like they're closer to that from a capability perspective. What's actually the higher risk here and the thing that's standing in the way more from their perspective is the safety and alignment of having these models potentially with your credit card details going off and doing all this crazy stuff without your knowledge. A lot of this sounds like sci-fi, but when you look at the vision models, you look at like how far like the reasoning has come along, it actually, from a core components and individual components perspective, I totally agree. I think this is actually a lot closer than most people understand.
Don't you think like Tesla can right now put autonomous cars out there just driving on their own without like any regulation to worry about? But the problem is there is regulation. There's all the safety that is the hindrance. And in some ways, it's a good thing. And, I guess in the next maybe 10 years, we'll see a lot more autonomous cars. But there is the reality that if someone gets in an accident, whose fault is it? But if someone's controlling my computer and doing stuff on my behalf, I don't know. These safety things can that so easily be circumvented.
That's the thing. I think they're right to look at this and have a little bit of like apprehension and potentially are running closed betas. They did actually make a lot of comments that they run these systems in-house for a number of months before they actually deploy it to the public. So there's also a pretty strong signal there that they will probably want to test these systems out. And it is entirely possible that they're already using these sorts of things in-house.
Let's just have it order pizza and just like focus on that domain before like start reorganizing like everything on my desktop and all of my personal files and my photos. It's kind of scary.
But something I think that's interesting is they did reveal that they have had some of these models that they released for a number of months. So it gives you a sense of like what the release cadence for them is as well.
Anything other juicy bits that he shared at the Dev Day?
Okay, so the other part here is that they're currently focusing on building agentic capable models. And what that basically means is it's a system that's working autonomously on your behalf to achieve a particular outcome. And this is level 2. And they do feel like they've essentially reached that, but they're going out basically maturing that and then working towards level 3 now. So I think this is a space that we can expect, like he says, to see a lot of innovation in the next couple of months and then for the next 2 years or so.
Can I throw a curveball at you? Because, Agentic, I think like I'm talking to like an Amazon chatbot, and they're like, how can I redirect your call? And I'm talking to a robot today, and that's very like a customer care agent. How is agentic workflows going beyond that kind of experience? Because it seems like it's already kind of within reach for a lot of people when they're like returning something or trying to order something online.
I mean, it's the ability to deal with a dynamic situation and understand the potential handoffs. And really what you're trying to do is build a end-to-end process where you can deploy this model or this agent, and it does in the same way that a person would. Like, okay, a customer support team hands over to the billing team to do a refund. You can imagine each one of those steps potentially being an agent or potentially even a network or a chain of agents as they described it in the video. I think these chains of agents actually is what software 3.0 is going to start to look like.
So today, when you use ChatGPT, it will go off and do a Google search for you. Like when it knows it doesn't know something, it goes off and gets it. So that's a very agentic thing to do. But you're saying that it goes potentially even beyond a Google search, maybe reaching into other internal systems or much more complex databases than just a Google search and utilizing that to accomplish the agentic task that you gave it.
Exactly. And it's coming up with a generalist toolkit and one that matches very closely to what a human would do. If I don't know the answer to something, what can I do? I go off onto the internet, I search for answers. I could also go off and escalate something to someone in my team and basically ask them for help. When you think about it, it's actually pretty limited number of options that you have to try and solve problems. And if you can train it on what are the 95% of steps that a human would take to solve a problem, it's usually probably going to be good enough. And when you look at how O1, how capable it is, and the new model they released, it's going through and it's looking at all of the steps that people have historically used to solve these sorts of problems. And what they've shown is that it's actually very capable. That methodology does apply.
But they hide it. They don't show it to you. If you're going agentic on me and you're going off to the whatever to find stuff, I kind of want to know what you're doing. It's kind of scary if it goes off and goes into the Department of Defense website and grabs some stuff and before it presents you the answer. I don't know about that.
I think that's why the concern around safety and alignment also exists is how much do you show people? But then if you show people how it's thinking, how much of your competitive advantage do you give away? So it's a little bit of a catch-22 there. The last thing I can think of that was relevant here is he spoke about offline models and are they going to be basically sharing that? And he said basically it's not a high priority, but he's open to doing it. And there's a lot of reasons to do local models, but it's not critical to their roadmap, which I thought was actually an interesting insight because again, when you look at the core mechanics of AGI and what you feel comfortable sharing, a local model will allow you to feel way more comfortable sharing very personal information. So it actually gives me a pretty interesting insight into their priorities really are around unlocking AGI rather than necessarily driving a specific mechanic or play, like let's say like the Apples of the world, which are trying to give you that personal, private, agentic experience.
So they're focusing on the leading edge, tip of the spear efforts to achieve AGI. And someone else out there is going to create like a small local version of it that will sit on your laptop, but it's just going to be an offshoot. It's more of a derivative of the bigger effort. And that's like table stakes and not interesting for them, going for the jugular for AGI.
That's what I take away from a lot of the fireside. So I see a lot of that $6 billion really driving towards that and potentially a little bit of distribution to make sure that they keep their reinforcement learning and human feedback nudging in the right direction, because a lot of that usage is what's helping them improve and build these frontier models so quickly.
All right, Sasha. Well, thanks again. Pretty exciting and putting some color to what $6.6 billion can be used for. And I'll see you next week. Okay, take care.
Sounds good.